All right, I'm going to walk through importing this Red Aglaonema into Unity and PT, and hopefully I don't miss many steps. So first things first, here's the PSB file, and we're going to drag it into the project. So inside Assets, Artwork, Plants, and then Plant PSBs, that's where all these go. Drag it in, and then it'll be down here. Now once we have it in, the next thing to do is we need to size it for the pot before we do anything else. So I'm going to drag that. Actually, and we're going to do that by adjusting the pixels per unit up here. So we're going to go to something like 5 as a starting point, just to have a little bit of size, and then we're going to drag it in. I think that looks a little bit too small for what we want, so we can compare it with the inventory items. Where are you? QR. To see, oh, here it is. Okay, so yeah, I should overhang a little bit on both sides. So I'm going to adjust the pixels per unit. It needs to be bigger, so then we make this smaller, and I think even a little bit more, so 3.5. And I do like to do the pixels per unit here rather than adjusting scaling later, because there are times where we do scale the plants, and we need to remember and restore scaling, and it's just kind of nice if they're all set to 1, so we don't have to worry about that too much. Okay, so here I'm going to temporarily adjust these layers in the sorting order up to the pot layer, which is where they will end up in the end, just so I can kind of lay it on the plant where it's going to go. And then we'll compare again against this image here. And it looks like to me it's still a little bit small, so I'm going to adjust it down to 3 and apply that. So that looks pretty good, actually, I think. So maybe we'll stick with that. Move this down here to where it'll sit in the pot. And then looking again at that, yeah, actually that looks just about right. Okay, so now we have the pixels per unit set there. So the next thing we can do is we need to go into the rigging UI and add some bones and whatnot to this plant. So here we'll go to the Red Aglaonema and the sprite editor, and then sprite editor to the skinning editor, and then in here I end up working with a single sprite at a time. I think it's easier to lay the bones in. There are ways in here of trying to add bones to everything at once, and then associating those bones with only those sprites. But I find it easier to pare this down, and I first find like what kind of represents the root of the plant, at least. So here's the base down here, and then I'm going to create bones off of that. I normally create like a single bone to start with down here, which isn't necessarily, actually let's create it here. I create a small bone to pair everything else off of. So the first one I'm going to do is basically for each of these leaves. Now I don't know if we need 2 or just 1 per leaf, but we'll try out a couple styles here. So I'm clicking on the bone I want to start with, and then you kind of move and left click to where you want, add a bone, left click to add another bone, and then right click to stop adding bones there, and then you kind of go back to where you were. So these transparent items aren't necessarily bones, they're just basically associate where you started from with this, so there, if you move a bone lower down, it will definitely affect these as well. And so I'm going to do this. Okay. So those should be all the bones we need for this. You see the geometry. Here is interesting. These two are mashed together a little bit, so they're going to move together. There's only one vertex shared here. Now we can edit this geometry to keep these two leaves totally separate. I'm going to try to do that here. So I use the split edge. The split edge piece, I select the sprite I want, so then you see this blue outline here. And then I'm going to grab this and left click and drag it down here, so these two leaves will end up separate. And then we add points on these lines here, so then we can include part of that sprite into one side of this geometry or the other. So there we have a line, so this leaf will be separate from this one. So if I add points here, which is really just going over the line, then left clicking to add the point, and then I can grab that point and drag it. And we don't want to clip this too much. The good thing is if I add points, I can't drag it on top of something else to where they would overlap. Where am I here? Add a point. Yeah, and these are really close together, so I'm just going to leave it like this. Now, okay. So when we create the weights for these bones, now these two leaves have separate pathways, so we can get them to act independently of each other. So I click on auto weights, and then I click on associate bones, and what am I not doing? Do this before. Bones, sprite, layer, generate. Oh, come on. Click on auto weights, and then I clicked on the sprite, and then I generated it here, and I didn't do anything else. I'm not sure what just happened before that. So now you see the different colors, color coding for bones. So you can grab these bones now and move them around. So we'll see that this is independent from this, thankfully. And this is exactly what we want. This will affect that a little bit, but it's not going to matter too much later on once all this layering is kind of in there. If you did want to de-emphasize how much this bone pulled on this vertex here, we could go into the weight slider, select the bone, and then select the vertex you want here, which is this highlighted in yellow, and then I drag this amount down. So then when you move this here, it'll pull on that one less. Okay, and then likewise up here, this one is affecting, yep, actually that looks pretty good. Okay, so you can play with these and see what you got going on and how they're going to move when you animate them. And I like the way all this looks, so I'm just going to leave it like this. So then next, I'm going to hide all the bones except for that very root bone that we started with. Then I'm going to hide this sprite because we're done with it. Show the next sprite, select it, and then create bones again. Left click on the red bone to start from there, and we basically do the same thing. Here, I left click there, right click, and then it goes back to the red bone, and I can click and click to add bones here, right click, drag this out. Add some bones here, and then the last one, just try to get some of that stem in here if possible. I'm going to click here, and then add the bone up there. So now if we go down to the weights, I will try to generate for these. This is what we got going on. Again, I think, for what we're doing, I like this okay. We could, this bone could affect this a little bit more so it doesn't quite stretch there, but again, these are going to be kind of layered behind each other, so we can probably let it go now. Interesting. So these two shouldn't be connected like that. And since we're in here, I'm just going to try to do this now. So I'm going to go and split the edge so I can edit the geometry. I'm going to drag this one back down here like we did with the other one. Add a point in here by clicking on it, dragging it out, clicking here, dragging it out, and then add points to this so I can get these to be like I want. Okay, so those two should be separate. Go to the weights, generate that again. So now this one should have more independence from the others. And since we're here to mess with it, this one is affecting this point up here too much. Don't know why, but it is. Go to the weight slider and de-emphasize this bone's interaction with that point. There we go. This weight brush is supposed to be doing the same thing, but I don't know how to use it. It doesn't work as well for me. I know. I use the weight slider. It seems to work fine. Okay. And then unselect that layer. Select the last layer to do here, deselect all the bones, hide them all, show the root one, and then we have the last layer selected, create some bones from here. We're already going from the red bones, they're all tied together, and then just add the last bones for this leaf. And I think I'm just going to try to do this and see what happens. Adding more bones is, I used to do quite a bit more, but I don't think it's actually necessary. So here, I guess it prevents some of this kind of stretching in here, but I think this is also to do with the geometry as well. So this, I'm going to adjust this a little bit, and actually I'm going to split this edge here, and move this down. What I just did there, I clicked somewhere and then it hit all this, so I just hit Control Z to undo whatever I did. I'm not sure what actually was going on there, but Control Z gets me back to this. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to the weights. I'm I'm going to let it regenerate those for me and then try these out again. So I don't want this bone to really affect these two vertices, so I'm going to go to the slider, select that one. I can hold shift to select more than one. Isn't it shift? It's control. Hold down control and add to the selection. Slide this down so they don't affect it as much. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this point here, this point here, this one. It shouldn't affect these. De-emphasize its effect on that. Come on. That's probably fine. Still wish it wasn't. I guess it's doing this because I didn't add those bones up here. If I had added bones in here, then this would not affect these so much just through the automatic association. But let's just keep messing with this here to try to tell that bone not to affect this part of the stem down here. So then it's just going to be more on its own there. Huh. Maybe should affect this more. So then when you move this, it just kind of stretches that a little bit. I'm going to split this bone because I don't like that affecting so much there. There you go. That's better. Okay, we'll start with that. Maybe I'll come back and do this later, but you can get the idea, I hope. I'm going to apply that. Now we've rigged all the bones and all the sprites. And then if we come back here to preview the pose, we should be able to play with the different bones and the different things. I already don't like how that's pinning there. But mostly this is looking pretty good. So like here, the stretching, right, we can either go back through and reassociate bones and change it, or just when we're animating the movement, we actually get this leaf, we just keep pretty minor so the stretching doesn't show up to be terrible. The one thing I'm going to fix real quick is this pinning. So this bone needs to affect this thing a little bit more. So I'm going to go back into the weight slider here, and then I want, which sprite is that? That's this sprite. Ah, I see. Dang it. Because I want this to move. Dang it. Okay, so I'm going to add a piece here, add a piece here, so then I can really better distinguish between who gets what here. Okay. So that's already better because it's not getting pinned as much. So this one, I want this one to have total control over this. So then there's no pinning at all really. And then this one, I think we'll actually pull on that one a little bit too. Nope, good, okay. Good, okay, that's what I want. Good to go. I'm going to apply this, and now we're done with the rigging phase. The next thing to do is close this. We can delete this one out of here because we're not going to use it. The next thing to do is add animations to this and get going. So these are the PSBs with the bones. Down here in the hierarchy, there is in prefabs, room items, plants, and then the next thing we do is make a plant image to house this thing. And this is an intermediate step we do for all the plants. This actually controls the animation stuff. So to do that, I start with any of these. I hit Control D to have Unity duplicate it for me. And then I rename this, and this is the Red, what's the name of it? Just grab the name from here, so I get it spelled right, and then add that to here. And then I'm going to take out the space because it just works better like that. Okay, and then we double click on this, and you'll see that because we duplicated the bunny ears, that's what's in here before. So we're going to remove that old PSB image. We're going to scroll up and find the red image here, add that, and then we add a component. With that selected, we need to add an animator here. So this will be the animation controller for this plant. The other thing we need to do in here now is these layers need to be set to the pot layer for all the visible layers, so then it'll layer correctly. And then we want to change the contact point object here to be at the base of the plant. So you move this one here to be where you want the plant to sit in the pot. Okay, and I think that's it for this phase. The next thing we need to do is create the animation for this. So again, up here, assets animations, plant animations, I'm going to grab any of these really. Boston Fern, hit Control D, rename this to be the Red Aglaonema. I think I've already butchered that. Change the folder name, and inside of here you see that there's the controller. So we want to keep this as the Red Aglaonema controller, and then the three states: happy state, sad state, and the idle state. So F2, come in here, paste in my names. So now I have the controller, I have these three which will be specific to this. Select the Red Aglaonema up here in the plant image item. And then this controller slot gets this controller here that we just copied. So that associates just this controller with this. Now we need to associate these three animations with this controller. When I select this up here in the animator tab, you can see down here at the bottom, this path shows us we have the controller selected. And then, but these happy, idle, and sad over here, you can see this is still referencing the Boston Fern. So for each of these, click on the sad, drag in the new sad animation, click on the idle, do the same thing, drag in the new idle one to here, the happy one to here. So now we have our basic animation set up and associated with this plant. In the animation tab, you see all these red or yellow pieces here for no bones for that, because these are the bones for the Boston Fern. So the next thing we need to do is for each of these states, select it, click in here, hit Control A, and delete those. And this just clears these back out to a a starting point so we can work with creating animations for this. All right. In the scene view, you see all the bones. We have the plant selected. I'm going to select the idle animation first, and we're going to record the actual animations for this. What I find kind of useful is you can click on the bones in the scene, or you can select the bones over here as well if you want to select a bunch. So if I want to, I'll come through here, I'll select the first one, hold down Shift, click on the last one to select them all, and then if I grab these, you'll see that it animates the whole plant at one time, or at least it's animating all those bones. So I'll use this often just to kind of get a baseline movement in, and then I'll go through and kind of tweak things after that. But this gives a general sense of the movement we want. I deselected this one down here because it was waggling the base of the stem a little bit more than I wanted. Okay. So I think my idle animations typically run about, maybe 10 seconds or something, right? So what I do to start this is I click in somewhere off of 0. Yeah, and then I'm going to click the record button, and then I'm going to move these. And what this does for me that I like is at the 0 point, at its starting point, it records the initial place of the plant. So then that's kind of the neutral spot that we'll go back to, the neutral pose. And then it's a matter of I'm going to go left a little bit, and then I'm going to click forward and go back right a little bit. And that kind of gives us the starting animation piece. And then I'm going to, you can just kind of add as many of these keyframes as you want. Just going to add, I don't know, I'm going to add 4 for now. And now once we kind of get these in here, you can kind of scrub through this up here to kind of see the general motion that we got going on here. And then what I want to do now, what I normally do now, is kind of go back through each of the keyframes and then kind of mess with individual bones and whatnot. So I kind of I get to something I kind of that I want to go with. So I'm at this frame here. You can select frames by going here to the next step. And then either clicking on bones one at a time or 2 at a time, holding the control and doing this, you can move and just kind of play with and get the animation that you want to go with. And this just gives, maybe this just gives a little more kind of character to what you're after in the animation instead of just moving the whole thing. Or maybe moving the whole thing is plenty. So I'm going to go through and just kind of tweak some of these things. So like in this case, it looks a little bunched up to me. I'm just going, I don't want to move it. Control Z. I normally don't move things unless I have to. I usually just am doing rotations off of the bones themselves. You can move things, but then you gotta, I found that it kind of complicates things a little bit, or at least it's not necessary. I do it here and there when I need to accommodate for some sort of stretching or weirdness that I see in the animation, but for the most part I haven't found it necessary. So like here, this is what we were talking about before. I'm not going to move this a lot because I don't like the stretching down there. So this leaf is just going to get mostly subtle movements in the overall piece, in the overall animation sequence here. But like these move nicely, so right. So if you wanted to have a little more dynamic motion with these, you can see it's stretching the one next to it a little bit. So you need to worry about that somewhat. But if I was going to kind of move these in tandem, then you can kind of accommodate for some of that. Like the top piece is independent from here. It's really when I move this bone that I get that stretching. So I'm going to lay off doing that and just kind of work with these two. And then go out here to the next one. Actually, let's do this. If I scrub through here, actually, if we play this, this is 2 seconds, so this is too fast. I want to stretch this out, so I click up at the top here, hit Control A, I get these 2 bars, and then I can drag this out to even like a 10-second loop. So this looks better. It's a little more chilled out. This movement is still a little bit too much, too rapid for me, I think. But maybe if I even just stretch this out a little more to like a 15-second piece, maybe it'll slow down enough that it's just kind of chilling in its idle pose. You'll see that pop back. We'll fix that in a second. You know, for the sake of this, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go with that for now, and then let's fix the fix that snapback piece. There's 2 ways I found to do this. I think this is the cheesier way, but this certainly works. You can select the top piece here to select the whole line of a keyframe. Control C, then I come out to somewhere in the future and click up here, Control V, and then between this keyframe and that, it's going to automatically go back to its starting point. So when it snaps back, it'll already be there, and you don't get that jump. The other way of doing this is we'll also set this as well. And Unity has a you can tell the animation that it's going to loop. So the animation engine inside of it will try to we'll go back and try to merge those together. So if you select idle over here, again, this is you can't get it except selecting the tree, and then you want to loop the pose, which is already selected, and goes back to 0. So Unity should try to smoothly go from the last keyframe back to the first keyframe. So I'm going to do that, make sure that's set for each one of these. And then the cycle offset is where it would loop back to. Okay, so there's, oh, sorry, this is the mini African violet. Dang it. Let me actually select the right one. Okay, so loop pose is not set here. I'm going to make sure it's set for all of these 3 items in here. Okay. Okay, good. So let's do the other 2 states. I still have that selected. I'm going to pull down, select this, select the plant up here, so we're actually recording for the plant. If I go to idle here, then now I'm going to go to happy here, and we're going to do the same thing. I click in a little bit so I can record the starting point. Click on record. I'm going to select all my bones that I want to record. I don't want this one, so I think if I control click, I can undo that selection, and then you know, just figure out what the happy dance for this plant looks like. 10 seconds, or 1/10 of a second, I think. All right, I mean, if this is kind of the action we want, and maybe we want to shake up here a little bit, we go back, we go to one side, go to the other side, and then let's do a little shimmy at the top here. And then again, I'll go back through and kind of fix some of these other aspects to these pieces as well. Okay, and then let's just try that. So these are usually, I'm going to Control A and drag this out to about maybe a 6-second loop, and let's just see what this looks like. Okay, so now I want a little more action for those individual bones that move really well up here. I'm still recording, so I can what can I do that won't stretch the heck out of this thing? So like this moves pretty well, and this moves pretty well. So maybe we get a little more action at the top here, basically the, you know, some sort of wave or some sort of excitement in these top leaves. I kind of like this sequence here, so we can also duplicate these in mass. I'm going to move this one down here, select the top, drag it down. I'm going to select kind of this sequence here, copy it, select a new time up here, and paste it in. Then I'm going to do that one more time and paste it in, just so we have this kind of repeated shimmy of these leaves up here. And then it'll go back to his thing. And I think, I don't know, let's try that. And for a plant, that seems pretty happy to me, so I think I'm going to call that good for happy. Now here, since we set that as loop pose, I'm just going to leave it and not duplicate this front one here. And then when we try it out in the game, we'll see that effect. So sad, similar. These are usually looking like 30, 45-second loops is what I end up with here, just because the plant in my mind is a little more lethargic. So record. And these don't need to be a lot. Because really most of the time I view these as being sad and kind of wilty, so I'll try to get these to be sad on me, and then I can move these together to eliminate that stretching, and then the leaves themselves could just kind of wilt down and be asking for thirst and nourishment and love. And maybe this one raises up to cry for help a little bit. And let's see, that's a weirdness there. I'm gonna leave that there. So this can, I don't want to stretch that behind it too much. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. I want to click ahead a little bit, and then as if the plant is trying to recover a little bit, it'll just kind of come up slightly. But then ultimately it'll just kind of be sad again and go back down. Okay, here. And give it a little movement to each bone. I kind of like there at least to be something for everything to do, just so when you're looking not one part that's really stuck, because your eye kind of picks up no movement as well as movement. So you can see up here, this bone here doesn't have anything recorded for it at this point. So even just to give it a little bit of a thing, and then these two bones here don't have anything. And this one's kind of buried in this. I don't know if we need to care about that too much. Which one's this? So that bone on this frame needs this. I'm going to click back to that frame where it's empty. And I'm just going to add a little bit in here. And actually, it's kind of nice because it makes this piece a little less stretched out. Okay, so that might be all we need to do for the sadness. If you go back to the start, and then it's going to wilt and kind of come up, and then go back. I don't want it to go back to the start for a while, so again, I'm going to duplicate these, or actually in this case, why don't we just do this? We'll use the looping of the pose again, and we want this to be like a real slow progression. So let's say 40 seconds to get from here down. Let me click this off, and we'll just kind of play this, and we'll just slowly kind of descend into sadness. This might be a little bit too slow. Move this down a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning and play. And then it comes up a little bit, and then we want it to loop back to this this keyframe here. I don't want to go back to the beginning, so it just kind of cycles between this sighing here. Okay, so to do that, I go back to that keyframe here. This is an offset of 590, which goes into that controller. So I select the red sad controller, loop the pose, and I want to offset back to 590. So it'll get to the end, and then it'll loop back to here. Let's try that. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so now we have happy, sad, and idle all done for this plant. So cool. Now we're ready to keep adding it to the game. The next piece to do here is turn that plant image into an actual plant. Down here, in plants, plant images, we have it there. Right below here, these are the plants that actually go into the pots in the game. So I'm going to select another one in here. I'm going to duplicate it with Control D, and then rename this to 590 to the same name. I don't know how to spell this. Okay, so here's the plant that will go in here, and this is where kind of the final steps of this. Let's go through it. So there's the plant as it's going to sit. Here's the donkey tail image because we copied it from the other one. We're going to remove that, and then we're going to find the plant image we just made. We're going to drag that in, and then we should be okay. Let's see. Let's examine some of these things on here. Oops, sorry. Let me go back 1 second. On the plant image itself, let's go back in here. Because we copied it from, oh no. Yeah, because we copied this from a blooming plant, from the cactus, I'm going to go back into the plant image here. In this plant image script, bloom stages, there are none. So I'm just going to clear these out to 0 because there's nothing blooming on this plant. Sorry about that. Okay, so that we're good. Plant itself. We'll double click to bring this up. And then I think we're good to go on here. The other pieces we need to worry about are these spawners. These are where the coins come out for the different types of spawning that we do. You'll see the red circles here as to where they are in the plant. So as long as they are somewhere inside the foliage, we're cool. We don't really need to move these around. If you wanted, you know, for instance, at night, if you wanted the coins to spawn way over here for some reason, you would just drag this over here. But we just always want them down kind of in the plant. All of these are in the plant nicely fine. Now, for some things like a cactus or a small plant, you need to adjust these so they kind of, the coins will shoot out from something that looks like the plant. But all of these are okay. So I'm not going to change anything else about these. Go up to the root of the Red Aglaonema, geez, I don't know. Okay. And over here in the plant script, important things, we want to create a new database ID. This is the unique ID for this whole type of plant in the system, so we want to make sure that this is unique, otherwise the code will get confused. There's no plant variations because this plant is not growing or blooming or anything like that, so we can leave that blank. And the other thing we need to do, this collider for the plant is too low. It's this box down here. You see it changes. What I want to do is offset this. I want to move it up a little bit, and I want to increase its size so it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be kind of over the center chunk of the plant here. So I can just adjust these offsets and sizes to position this, and that'll be fine. Okay, so this plant is good to go as far as the image. Now we need to put it into the database so it can be used and show up in the shop. So we come down here to the known plant database, and I check to see if there's already an entry in here that doesn't have a prototype for it. Let's see. I don't see it. So again, I'm going to select any of these here, I guess, and yeah, Control D to duplicate that entry, and then this rabbit ear entry is going to become the one for this item. Okay, so the database ID we had up there, I copied when we created it. I'm going to paste it in here, so when we look it up, we know which visual to create for it. This is a plant. Now I'm going to go to the database trait table because there was an entry for this. I'm going to copy the name and paste in here, and then paste in the description to the description. So it shows up in the store, and then the price for this was there a price on here? There's no price on here. Oh, dang it. Where is it? $700 for this. So this plant is 700, and then it looked like a medium plant to me, so I think that's fine. Ownership count, this means we can own up to 10,000 of these things, so it's fine. This inventory trait, don't worry about this. This is where the thumbnail comes in. I'll fix this up when I go and work on the inventory. Now here, there's a couple things. This is just a normal plant in a pot, so it doesn't have any particular placement criteria of it must be hanging or it must be on the ground. It itself is not elevated. This is used for things like plant stands. Down here, these two sliders actually come into play. How much water and fertilizer does this consume? So it dictates how often the symbols come up, right? So if you know that this plant consumes a lot of fertilizer, right, you can say, oh yeah, it consumes 50% up here, 0.52, 100% each day, or it consumes a little bit less. And I don't know what the RSI, this kind of consumes 1/10 of its water every day. And once it gets down to, you know, like 75% left or something like that internally, that's when the marker shows up. So you can adjust these to kind of represent how thirsty and needy of food it is. Current water level, these all get set to 1 when you buy the plant, so we're cool there. There are no blooms, so we leave that as 0. There's no special pots for this, so we leave that as 0. This can go into a hanging pot, so it's hanging pot compatible. We leave that there. It doesn't need to be required, like on a plant stand or a shelf or a bench or anything like that, so we leave this unchecked. And the last, oh yeah, unlocked via achievement. All right, this is a level 2 plant, so there's an achievement for buying that second apartment, and that's right here. So you want to say the apartment 2 needs to be purchased before this will show up in the plant store. And then at that, I think we're actually good. So if we want to play now, we should see this little guy show up. Okay, so now, oops, what we can do is if I go out to move this out of the way, kind of get this stuff out of the way. If I go out to the street and I go out to the plant store, it's not here, which is fine because it's random. What you can do to check it out is go into the mid-tab plant store here. This dev controls piece is grayed out, so it's not enabled. Select that, click here to enable it, which gives you the button that you can use to cycle through plants in the store. And then let's just click through this, and hopefully that plant that we just made will show up here in a second. Come on. See, the other ones are showing up. Why? Oh, you know what I didn't do? Dang it. So there's no, we didn't associate it with that. So if I go back to the plant database, go back into the Red Aglaonema, and you see here that you see all these stars. That means there's actually an asset associated with this. I forgot to drag in our plant to this. Dang it, dang it. Plant, I find our Red Aglaonema. I drag that into the prefab slot here. And now, hopefully, with a few there it is. Here's our Red Aglaonema with our price and our description. And if I buy that, and go back to the store, go back to our apartment, here it is, ready to be placed wherever we want it to be. All right. And that's it. That's 54 minutes. Sometimes it takes me less if I'm not talking as well, but that's the whole procedure.